YouTube, it's Catherine from Jayne Catherine on Books, and I realised that I hadn't done my wrap up of Jodi Picoult's Great Small Things, and I promised a long wrap up of this because I feel that I've got quite a lot to say on it, but I am warning everybody it does contain spoilers. I can't really go into everything I want to say without relating it to quite specific points in the plot. So you know, for those of you that haven't read it, or just let you know that it does contain spoilers, and don't bother watching this if you haven't read it yet and you're intending to. So, Small Great Things, I've got it in hardback, lovely rose gold spine, and yeah, it's for those of you that don't know, the synopsis of the book is we have Ruth, who is a qualified nurse midwife over in the States. She's black and has worked at this hospital for a long time, quite a senior position, well respected, very proficient at her job, and had a really good career at this hospital, no problems from what I can gather. And then one day there is a couple that comes in and has their baby boy, and Ruth goes in to do its first day baby checks that midwives do. I'm not sure they're called midwives in the States, but we call them midwives here, and goes and checks the baby over. Now, we do have some backstory about this couple, and they are being indoctrinated, shall we say, to be very much of what the old National Front used to be, who were very bigoted, very racist, not altogether nice people. Used to go on rallies. Oh, here we go again. Do you know what? As soon as I come outside, they start. We've got the RAF, because we're near the sea. They all come out doing the practice circles. So if we haven't got birds banging of people cutting wood up, we've now got the planes. Anyway, we'll just have to try and ignore that. I hope you can still hear me. So yeah, so we've got having a look if you can see their names. Actually, I have to keep looking at my book because I've got so much that I want to say. Bryn and Bethany, I think it is. Brittany and Bryn. Can't remember at the minute. I'll find it somewhere. Anyway, they decide that because of their racial prejudices, they don't want Ruth to look after their baby again. So they have a word with the senior nurse, and she puts a post-it note on the notes of this baby, more or less to say, with effect, nobody of colour can look after this child. They don't name Ruth, but she's the only one of colour that works there. And then what proceeds to happen is that she's left in an awkward position whereby there's no other staff to look after this baby in an emergency situation. Does she, doesn't she? She then gets taken to court for malpractice, and it's a very good book. And especially, I might come at it from sort of extra viewpoints, because having been a qualified nurse in the UK for 30 odd years, I've been an NHS manager, and I have had to manage some really difficult situations that have arisen in a managerial position. There's loads of things here that I struggle with. First of all, I did some research actually into the code of practice. As you'll probably be aware, as nurses we do have a code of conduct, code of practice that we have to follow. Now, there are differences between what our code of conduct is here in the UK and what it is in the States, and what I was looking at, right, okay, so I was looking at what Ruth's code of conduct would have been over there. And from the book it says that her code of conduct is to carry out faithfully and to the best of my ability the instructions of a nurse who may be assigned to supervise my work. Now, and it goes on to say basically that if you've got another nurse or a senior person that gives you instructions, that you have to follow those or else you're breaking your code of conduct. I have a big issue with this. Over here we are as qualified nurses, we are practitioners in our own right. That doesn't mean to say that as a junior you don't you aren't supervised, you're not mentored, you don't know everything. However, you do not have to follow something. Who's driving me mad now? You do not have to follow something just because another nurse tells you to. You have got to make decisions for your patients. Now, you do have a duty of care that if it's beyond your expertise, you go and find help on this. But you don't have to follow the instructions of a senior nurse or doctor if you feel that there's something that you feel is unsafe, or it is your rights to question what it is that they're asking you to do. You have got that right that if you feel that in your professional judgment that they're asking you to do an incorrect or unsafe practice. So first of all, I have a problem with the fact that that post-it note was put on there, and obviously by looking at the guidelines for in the States, Ruth had no choice but to follow it. And here lies the problem, because especially as somebody that's well seasoned as her, very experienced, if you're in an emergency situation and you're told don't get involved, you mustn't get involved, but it's in your training, it's in your ethics, you are there to promote life and do whatever you can to promote life. And of course you'd be in this dilemma. The hospital have a duty of care to their employees. They have a duty of care to keep Ruth safe, and there would have been ways round this. It could have been handled differently. And sorry, I'm going off with my nursing hat on, and not everybody probably wants to hear this. We're talking about a book, but it's a good representational book that makes you think about a lot of issues. I don't think those parents have rights to stipulate their racial, their racial preferences. They're there to be cared for, and most people would want their child to be cared for by somebody that's very senior and very experienced. So for one, I'm disgusted that the hospital doesn't stick up for Ruth. In fact, they really sell her down the river as far as I'm concerned. They don't watch her back at all. They're quite happy for her to go to court and carry the can for this. There could have been ways round it. They could have, first of all, as a manager, looked to see if they could have swapped her to a different work area, swapped with another person, so that although I don't agree with that child was only going to be in for a matter of days, and if there could have been a swap round of staff or rotas or something along those lines so that Ruth wasn't put in that position, then they had a duty of care to do that. They also had a duty of care to make sure there's sufficient staff on. It shouldn't have been in a situation, and I know it's dire, it's getting very difficult in the NHS. I do feel for staff, the pressures that they're having to work under, and there's just not enough nurses. However, that was understaffed, that unit, so that when one person went off to an emergency situation, Ruth shouldn't have been left where the emergency arose and she had no choice but to be involved. So lots to think about there. I really feel that had this been a real life case, and I'm sure there's been many very similar, I feel that Ruth was very much let down by the establishment, by her manager, um, and I think it was disgraceful. We've got this problem now that um, people can be individually sued. We used to have our vicarious liability that used to cover for anything that accidental malpractice or whatever. That no longer covers you from being independently sued as a practitioner in your own right. Something for you to think about. Now then, let's have a look what else that also, yes, and the other thing is that I know we have the health and safety executive here. I know they have OSHA, which is the health and safety body over in the States, and they have the same health and safety law to protect their employees. And it's employers have a duty of care to protect employees in the workplace from discrimination of any kind. Wasn't done there, was it? So then there's a very strong, very hard hitting element in here, racial element in this book, which was excellently written. It was very hard hitting. At times it was very difficult to read. The language was really derogatory. It was really offensive. And I think that's what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to hit you and think, oh my goodness me, there are people around that have got these bigoted and hateful views. And I think we know that, but I don't think we often, and especially sort of as white middle class, I suppose if we're looking at myself, when this book is very thought-provoking, so it makes you think about these things. And I think looking at my own views, and obviously very much being brought up in a multicultural, although I brought up in the 70s, being in sort of the nursing profession, and also my mum was in the nursing profession. We've always mixed with people from all races, all backgrounds, all colours and creeds. So therefore you can believe that things are so improved, and they improved dramatically. But I think it really hit me that this sort of thing is still quite rife in certain parts of the world, certain parts of America, certain parts of the UK. And I found it quite shocking. And I think that everybody should read this book, and it just makes you think, how you would feel to be treated in that way. The book, in between, we sort of have what's happening with Ruth and how she's coming to terms with the fact that she's suspended and that she's actually taken to prison. And although it for a small space of time, I thought, goodness me, there for the grace of God go I. It could happen to any nurse, anybody. And in this instance, I don't think that she did anything particularly wrong. She did end up trying to help this baby, because instinct kicked in, and you can't just stand by, and it is very difficult. I can liken it to many years ago I worked in coronary care, and when I did my advanced life support training, and you were had to do so many, you did a big defibrillation course, and how we managed cardiac arrest situations, and I took the lead in that once I'd completed all my competencies. But you were in this position where middle of the night somebody would have a cardiac arrest. You knew, because you'd done your training, that A, B, C and D needed to happen, but you got to wait for a doctor to run. We're talking quite considerable space from the residences across to the emergency situation, and it's one of those, whereas you know what to do, what you should do. You know that perhaps if somebody doesn't get there in a minute, this patient's going to not make it, but you haven't been signed off legally to do it. It's one of those sorts of things. And I think we have to admire that nurses and doctors even have to make these decisions regularly, and it's difficult enough without having bigoted patients, bigoted parents for whatever. You know, that happens anyway. That happens, you get a lot of hassle anyway, even without the racial card being thrown at you. So we look at the backstory of the couple. Now it's Turk and Brit. Turk is the husband, and they've, especially Brit, she's been brought up with a father who sort of more or less started this fundamentalist group, and Turk joined because he had an unhappy childhood, things weren't going right in his life, so obviously you can see how these kids get drawn in. And you know, this is no different to the sorts of things that's happening in today's world, today's climate. You know, it can be anybody that things aren't right in their life get drawn into these fundamental groups. These two, white, middle class backgrounds, no particular religious belief, but one was indoctrinated because she knew nothing else, because that's what her father did. And then Turk, you know, it was a way out from his very unhappy life. And it even shows you in here that these people are prepared to kill for the cause. So as I say, we follow Ruth, we follow her getting a lawyer, we move closer to trial. We're then introduced to Kennedy, who is the lawyer that's been assigned to her case. It's the first time that she's really managed a case of this seniority, so obviously she's wanting it to go well. She's got something to prove, and we've also got Adisa, who's Ruth's sister. Now I love this character. She's very sassy, she's very outspoken, she knows it for what it is. I mean, she has a go at Ruth because Ruth has bought a property in the middle of a very white middle class neighborhood, and you know, Adisa's very much, we should keep to our own kind, girl, you know, you should be over here where we live. You're leaving yourself wide open working at that hospital, you know, leaving yourself wide open to this sort of thing if you live where you do. And you know, Ruth's just wanting a decent life and upbringing for her son. She's a single parent. Her husband died, I think it was Vietnam. He's a Vietnam veteran, so he has, you know, he's fought for his country. And this poor woman, you know, is going through this hell. But I mean, that's life, isn't it? But yeah, I think she's very good support. The other thing that I think was quite striking is, I don't know too much about the law, generally about the law. I know quite a lot about occupational health law and health and safety law, because that's where I've done a lot of my work, nursing law, but law in general. And it's very interesting, the things that came up in the court case, and the fact that that Ruth was advised not to use the race card, and that would go against her if she did use that. Now I found that a bit difficult to you know, to take on board, really. And I thought, well, you know, this whole mess is due to racial prejudice. This is the situation that she's in. And, you know, and also we're about this duty of care from the hospital to Ruth, and how they handled this situation. Oh, I've just got some little birdies over there, some babies. They're holding onto the tree for dear life. I think they were just fledged. The wind's blowing and the... Bless them. Sorry, I digress. You know what I'm like when I get in my garden. You know, it made you think And a quote that I want to use out of the book, it says, "To the state, it doesn't matter if you're black or white or green. You had a legal duty to take care of an infant under your charge. Just because your boss said don't touch the baby doesn't get you a free pass to do nothing." Now, that statement's quite controversial in itself, because if we're going back to the nursing law is you do as your boss tells you. In America, you know, you follow what your senior says and you do it, and this is the difficulty that Ruth was in. But in the court of law, it's saying you can't pull the race card. You can't say, oh, well, I was told by my boss not to touch this baby, or it was the parents' wishes. It states in the law that, you know, you have a legal duty to take care of an infant under your charge. So, all kind of worms this, because it should have been left to Ruth to be able to do that. She was stopped that, she wasn't allowed to do that. The wishes of the parents were just followed without question. But, you know, in a court of law, they fed Ruth to the lion's den. Because this court is saying it doesn't matter what your colour or creed, it doesn't matter what somebody said or didn't say that's more senior to you. You have a duty in your own right as a qualified nurse to do your best for your patients. Hence why I feel that we are better covered with the UK, the NMC Code of Conduct, because, yeah, we are responsible in our own rights, and therefore, you know, have to speak up if we think something isn't quite right. I've actually, and I know I can sit here and look differently, and we're back to the nursing thing again, sorry, but I can look differently because, you know, I've got many years under my belt and very senior experience. But even going back to when I was a junior staff nurse in coronary care, you know, I stopped a doctor giving a lethal dose of something to a patient intravenously because I knew it was the wrong dose. I didn't just think, oh, he's a doctor, let him do it. No, you know, these are the dilemmas that you're faced with. So, yeah, I know we're back to but I want you to look, and I think that Jodi Picoult has been very, very clever in how this plot has been interweaved. It's as if she's researched everything and she's turned everything on its head. She's looked at very important issues about employment law, about how big the main thing is race and people's prejudices. It's also highlighted some of the laws that people, you know, the laws that are going to go against people in a court case. Yeah, loved it. So, just to wrap everything up, I was pleased this book had a satisfying ending. I would have been absolutely furious if it hadn't. If, you know, if justice wasn't served and Ruth wasn't okay, you know, I'd have been, I know it's a book, but this is the cleverness of the writing of it. It deserves more than 5 stars. It gets all these emotions, you know. So incensed I could have thrown the book across the room if she hadn't got off, you know. I'd have to keep saying, remind yourself, Catherine, it's a book, it's a book. But yeah, this happens in real life, you know, and I think for a book to, you can't just read it emotively. For a book to incense so many different emotions in you, it's really done its job. So the one thing I couldn't quite believe that we had this sudden change in Turk at the end of the book, and it suddenly went from this really awful, nasty piece of work. We suddenly had this change into somebody that was, you know, completely different character. I'm not quite sure I believe that, you know, that was as believable. Some people do change, yes. I'll leave that one open. But I've just put, to conclude, wow, what a thought-provoking piece of fiction. Extremely well written, extremely sad, extremely gritty, and a must-read for anyone who has an interest in equality for all. So, yeah, I think this is a must-read. You can't just read through it and in one sitting. I don't think that's the best way to read it. So I think that there's some lessons for all of us in this book. Yeah, well worth a read. well worth it for challenging our own beliefs. Excellent. So, thank you for listening to me get on my soapbox and yeah, give this book a try. See you again next time. Bye.